and the man who produced that highlight for BYU football and an NFL veteran, David Nixon, is now joining us on BYU Sports Nation.
Was that all Brandon Bradley, or did you do the job there?
I mean, the ball was tipped in the air. If I don't catch that, something's wrong with me. Yeah, I just laughed at the quality of that video. I mean, how grainy is that video?
How old are you, David?
Honestly, it dates me a little bit. In fact, I tell the story all the time. My family, everyone knows I'm from Texas. My family, they had to watch. My parents came out to the games, but my grandparents, other family members, had to watch our games on a sling box back in Texas.
Not Sling the app, a sling box.
No, a sling box. We had to put a box in my grandparents' house here in Utah, so my grandparents in Texas could watch the game.
Yep.
It'd be via the sling box. The whole thing was wild. So anytime I hear any of the players now complain or anything, I'm like, listen, you play on ESPN in HD. I played on the Mountain in SD, standard def, and it wasn't as great.
480p for the win. Oh, my gosh.
David Nixon coming to us in high definition from his home.
like this Zoom is better than the broadcast when you played. Which we were in school at the same time, so we can't act like you're that old.
Yeah, here's the technological advances. All right, David, BYU 4-1 after 5 games as they enter the bye week. Is this, when you look at how the 5 games broke down, is this as good a start as you thought were possible for BYU through 5 games? Or were you thinking 5-0 was possible?
Yeah, listen, obviously I'm ecstatic with where they're at. And for me, I'm happy with where they're heading with the trajectory. But I'm also happy if you look back at that Kansas game, you gift wrapped them 14 points. And you take those away and you're in that game. If not, you win, right? So you take all that into account, and yes, you can look at that 4-1 schedule, record, I should say. But when you take it on account, you're like, man, this team is playing really good football. And yes, there's stretches where BYU struggled. You look at the Cincinnati first half, they struggled until that last drive. But all in all, I mean, I feel like defensively, and you guys showed some numbers earlier, you know, it's interesting that they match up similar to last year, but I would argue that the competition is obviously better this year, as well as just the different looks BYU is giving, right? And the way they're able to turn over they had early in the season as well to keep the BYU in the game. And so, you know, I'm very optimistic with this team. 4-1, yes. When you look at it from the record wise, I get even more excited watching them play football and seeing how this team is kind of slowly progressing, developing. That's, I think, what gives me a lot of optimism as we head into the rest of the season.
How do you kind of weigh this, too, against the schedule that BYU's never faced before, which BYU's just getting into with 2 games, right, against teams that it could hang with? There's going to be some games that are going to be tougher down the stretch, right, with Texas and Oklahoma and whatnot. But how do we sort of approach this as we look at the stats, because BYU's never played this kind of schedule?
Yeah, I think that's what's so fun about this. These guys, everyone will look back and say, hey, the 2023 first-year Big 12 team did this or that, right? I mean, they're guinea pigs, and they're in uncharted territory where you're in a P5 and you're having to navigate, now the bye week. You're having to navigate, potentially when BYU plays Texas, they might be the number 1 team in the country, right? And who knows what Oklahoma does the rest of the season. They keep winning where they move up in the polls. And so you're having to navigate this whole landscape of week in and week out playing not only P5 opponents, but conference opponents, guys who are now dialed in, who have been scouting you leading up to this season, knowing that BYU is going to be coming into the Big 12. They've been scouting BYU for the last year and a half or whatever it has been since the announcement was made. And so it's a whole different dynamic than the independents where they kind of just went game by game. Now it just bears so much more weight. There's so much more preparation by other teams as well as BYU. And so you look at that remaining schedule, man, I get excited thinking of the potential that once again that BYU has to go out there. And if they play the ball they're playing, Texas and Oklahoma will be tough games, but Oklahoma at home, I like BYU's odds, especially we'll see if it's a night game or not, right? We like those odds. But you look at the rest of those games, I think they're all very winnable games. And I think BYU has a shot, and frankly, in all of them. We've seen BYU's history with Texas as well. So I don't count this team out against anyone. And I think if, depending on what continues to happen with injuries, if BYU can be healthy, I think they have a shot with any of the teams remaining on their schedule.
David, let's say BYU goes 3-4, and full clarity, Jeremy and I believe that there are 3 wins remaining on the schedule, maybe a 4th. Well, let's say they go 3-4 over the back 7 and finish 7-5. Would that be good enough for you, or would you feel like, there's more there? I'm a little disappointed.
Yeah, at this point, I feel like 7-5 would be just kind of I think everyone before the season said, hey, 6-6, get to a bowl game. Now that you started 4-1, and like I said, everyone can see what this team has put on film and put out there on the field. I think 7-5 would kind of be like, okay, that was okay season. I think you go 8-4. I think everyone's pretty happy. Obviously 9+, I'm ecstatic, right? In your first season of the Big 12. But for me, I think the bar has now been reset. So probably at 8-4, it would be a pretty good season. I think 7-5. I think you just kind of, we're happy, but you're going to a bowl game, but we left some out there on the table.
Okay, BYU in the Big 12 right now, in the upper echelon at 4-1, 1-1 in league. Obviously, Texas and Oklahoma look good. West Virginia's been the surprise at 2-0 in the league. Big win over TCU on the road last week. What do you make of kind of where BYU fits in the league, and what do you think of Big 12 play so far?
I can't remember which tweet it was, but somebody else in the Big 12 podcast or somebody put out a tweet. I think BYU was number 4, right behind Kansas and obviously Oklahoma and Texas. That number felt good to me, being in that number 4 spot. But I tell you what, I mean, West Virginia, as you mentioned, there's some sleepers in this league right now, and West Virginia is definitely one of them. I don't know. I feel like number 4 is good. Maybe it's a little too high. I like this team having to play with a chip on their shoulder. Think about what they did when they were big underdogs against Arkansas, big underdogs against Kansas the next week. And then, of course, the Cincinnati game was all over the place, too. And so I like BYU being more middle, back of the path as far as rankings go, because I think they play much better with this chip on their shoulder. No cares in the world. There's no pressure. They go out there and play loose. But if we're talking just kind of a mid-year poll, I think they're in the top half for sure. And the TCU games will be very telling. Going on the road, obviously their first road game in the Big 12 didn't fare too well. How do they go on the road against TCU and how they perform? If BYU can go out there and have a convincing win or even a win at that, I really do think the sky's the limit for this team because we've seen glimpses of brilliance from this team. We've seen when they can go out there and I mean, like the drive before halftime against Cincinnati, just 3 plays, boom, 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 touchdown. We've seen the defense go out there and pick off, pick 6 by Jacob Robinson there in the first half as well. So this team has the ability, and they just can't cop up points like we saw in Kansas, right? You just can't give away points, and especially Big 12 play. So I'm really intrigued. I think the TCU game will tell us a lot about this team. I think we kind of have an idea who this team is. But if this team can go down to TCU and walk in there and get a W, man, that's a lot of confidence, a huge confidence boost they need kind of for the rest of the season. 11
days to get ready for TCU on October 14th. Hopefully BYU can shore some things up and prepare themselves for a tough road challenge in Dallas-Fort Worth. David Nixon, always great to talk to you, man. We'll see you on After Further Review.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, fellas.
Now, we should note that David Nixon was a huge part of a notable win at TCU.
Yes, he was.
In 2006, he forced a fumble
in that
game.
Jeff Ballard?
Yep.
Is that the quarterback?
Number 16, Jeff Ballard.
As seen on Versus. What is that? Now it's
I believe Versus had an HD option, so at least they had that going for them.
It was in 1K.
Yeah.